these are my 5 top favourite British tanks in War Thunder. Why did I say British? It's because I got British on my mind. What is this video going to be called anyway? My top 5 favourite tanks in War Thunder? My 5 favourite tanks in War Thunder? These are my top 5 favourite tanks in War Thunder. Now, these are just my favourite tanks that I can play, that I can just jump into and I have fun. There's not much thought really behind these, in particular about the intricate designs within the War Thunder gameplay dynamic. They're just vehicles I find fun, and most probably you find these vehicles fun as well. Anyway, let's just jump right into it. Okay, let's just get this one out of the way. Yeah, it's a bit wearable, but yes, it is the Tiger tank, or Tiger H1, which I like because it's the first one you get and it's the one I played the most of. Most of the fighting in War Thunder happens at like close to medium ranges I find, mostly because I put myself in those situations. So, what works for me is having the most heavily armoured vehicle I can, with a pretty good cannon to respond with. And the Tiger is the solution for my fighting style. Great armour all around, but what matters extra more for me is really good side armour. This works especially well for me because in close quarter environments, you do want that extra side armour. Because if I was to compare the Tiger with the Panther, if this was real life, they built like 5,000 Panthers and they built 1,000 Tigers, no, less than 1,000 Tigers, and the Tiger still got the reputation it did. Now, if I was to compare this with the Panther side armour, that thing is basically paper and tissues, you know, mushed together, maybe with a bit of mesh, but is essentially just paper mache. The Panther cannot cope in close quarters environments and it has a terrible reverse gear. The Tiger is just perfect for close to medium environments. Not only do you have really good armour, but you've got the 88 cannon, which is not good for sniping. It's only good for around mid-range, it has pretty bad drop. If you did want to go for sniping, the Panther would be a better option. And in real life, the Panther was a better option than the Tiger, I think, in most situations. But in War Thunder, the Tiger excels, because not only do you have really good armour, on the sides especially, because in close quarters environments you're more likely to be hit in your side, but also the cannon has lots of HE filler. The Panther 75mm round doesn't have as much HE, so when you pen the target, it might not one-shot the crew. Whereas with the 88, if you're going to pen something, it is probably going to one-shot the enemy tank. And also, you can take a few hits to the side. For example, if you're moving for the town in Poland, and you get hit by a sneaky T-34-76, you might just be about alright if you get hit in the side. If you're in the Panther though, I'm pretty sure the stubby little short 75 of the Sherman M4, that can easily go for your side armour. Another thing the Tiger's pretty alright at, being an armoured box that can eat rockets and bombs. Yes, it is pretty okay at resisting CAS. So that's a plus side I suppose in some way. But at the end of the day, it's a tank that's put all of its stat points into just slightly above average armour and slightly above average gun. And its mobility isn't even really sacrificed. It can get going, it's just not as nippy as something like a Locust or a Puma. The next one on my list is the KV-2. I brought up the KV-1 earlier and I do like the KV-1. It's just the chunky T-34, especially the early variants where it's got a 76mm gun from the T-34 and 75mm of armour in all directions. 75mm forward, 75mm on the sides, on the rear, on the turret, everywhere. The KV-2's got the same chassis as the KV-1, including like, you know, on the new turret it's got 75mm armour everywhere. But now you've got a stubby 152mm howitzer, which really does fit my close quarters playstyle, because you're not sniping with a 152mm howitzer in War Thunder. It's very difficult to find an enemy's range and then reliably hit them. And this ain't, you know, artillery. You need to get direct hits to kill enemy tanks with this sort of weapon. So, you bring the KV-2 into close quarters combat. And it is a do or die weapon. You go around the corner, you see the enemy, ideally you acquire them first or you've taken them off guard, and you hit them with a 152mm round that weighs almost 50 kilograms. I mean, 50 kilograms is like the shell on the propellant, but that's not the point. It's a chunky ass shell. If you hit someone at the current BR that it is, you will kill them. In fact, back in the day when I was practically a youngster in my youth, the KV-2 used to go up against Panthers and Tigers all the time. They've lowered it down in War Thunder to a bonkers down low BR, which I won't say because by the time this video is out, it'll probably be out of date or Gaijin will change their BRs again. But at the moment, it doesn't face Tigers and Panthers anymore, which is... It was already pretty good to be able to kill them, and it doesn't have to face them. It is let down though by its really long reload time. its default reload time is like 43, 44 seconds. Which, if you pay to win the absolute living hell out of it, you can get it down to around 32 seconds. Which is very scummy because I spent a stupid amount of golden eagles to see how low I could get it. Even with the pay to win of the pay to win, most pay to win you could do, a 32 second reload on that tank is not good. And although you do have 75mm of armor in all directions, it's all very flat. And you're a really big target for enemy cannons. If you miss that first engagement shot, they will get you. You might get lucky, they might bounce off you, but you've got a 30-second plus reload. Realistically, for new players, I guess closer to 40 seconds. And most tanks have like an 8 to 12 second fire rate, so they can fire, 3 to 4 rounds into you before you can fire one back. This doesn't include them breaking your cannon barrel or sniping your crew members or setting you on fire. You're putting all your stat points into armor and cannon, and you better hope that works because your dexterity is very low. At this point, you can see that I like close range brawling. But who said I like just heavy tanks? The M18. Now, this thing is a slippery eel. It has got excellent speed and mobility, and it just kind of goes zoop. It zips through the enemy's lines. It will always be where you least expect it, especially if you're facing it. Like, they will find the silliest positions to get into to ambush you. Because arbitrarily in your monkey brain you're like, yes, I am on my side of the map, and therefore if I'm on my half of the map, I will be safe here. No. The M18 says no to that. It disregarded the book of German tank design, which is like, yes, tank destroyers have 2 lines. They must be super heavy gun on a medium tank chassis, or there must be a really heavily armored box. But at the end of the day, the gun points forward, and it will be armored. Americans said, yo, fuck that. We're going to put our big-ass cannon in a really mobile turret on a speedy chassis. And we're going to zip around the battlefield to where we're needed, when we're needed. And that was the Americans' tactic. I think in real life it was supposed to be like if armor was spotted, the M18s were in reserve and they'll be called up and they'll zip to where they were needed and respond to the enemy armor threat. Now there is the M10. Which is sort of like an M18, and it does have the same speed, except it lacks the turret rotation, which I love about the M18. The M10's turret moves like unholy slowly, like I've seen paint dry at a faster rate than this turret traverses. So, if you do end up engaging the enemy, you will be facing them like a tank destroyer, where you're trying to point your hull at them, and that kind of ruins the vibe of being a speedy thing on the battlefield. I prefer to have the M18's turret, which can rotate right, rotate left. It's got really good power to weight. Like, it accelerates really fast. I mean, this thing's practically, a rally car. You see these things going around the circuits on the Isle of Wight. But to get all the speed, it is very light. Not having armor and also being open topped does have its downsides as well. Like, anything, like anti-aircraft guns that notice you like, that tank is not on our side, is it? They will light you up. You won't get this issue. Like in a German tank destroyer, like the Jagdpanther, you'll be fine being shot in the side by an enemy SPA. In the M18, nope, all your crew will die instantly. And being open-topped as well, really vulnerable to bombing and strafing runs as well, so enemy pilots that spot you, even if they're just a fighter plane like a 109 or a Spitfire, they'll be like, I've got, cannons, I'll try and, aim inside from above, and they'll strafe you, they'll probably kill off your crew. You are a glass cannon though. And it is really fun to play because you can get some really good, aces. If you're lucky, you might get like 3 to 5 kills by just being this ripping and tearing machine. Kind of like in Doom, the way you are killing, monsters and, rip them and get their health back and your ammo. It's kind of like this with the M18. You charge across the battle. Yes, you, tank destroyer. I see you looking towards my spawn point. Nope, you're dead now. What's that? Enemy SPA in the back. You figure it's up. Nope, what's that? Another tank reinforcing the front lines. Nyom. You just yanked them out of the battle and they're like, what the fuck? I didn't even... What are you doing? Why are you almost outside my spawn point camping over there? But you're not camping. You're just zipping around the battlefield. And then, you relocate. You don't sit in one place and camp. That's useless. No. You've got speed on your side. You're wiggling in and out of buildings. Oh, look at that. An enemy plane spotted you. Never mind. You're just going to slide behind this building. Now they can't even hit you. You've got good mobility, a really good cannon. Take advantage of it and pray you don't get hit. Right, Great Britain, the tortoise or tortoise. I do like my heavy tanks, and there is something so Chad about the tortoise. It is the pinnacle of British heavy tank design, out-of-date tank design. Yes, this is an armoured box with a 32-pounder gun. We're talking almost naval gun size. We will use this to get through the Siegfried Line, the heaviest of German fortifications in the siege of Berlin. We will use this super heavy tank, which I don't think even got to Europe. But just in case, you know, it was good to have this thing in development. Now, when it comes to gameplay in War Thunder, I love the kind of dueling tank attitude. I don't like it kind of when you shoot a tank and it just dies. It's boring. I like the strategy that you kind of get in ARB in the lower like BR 3.0 range where, yes, I see a bomber. I must approach from a really slick angle where his turrets are not, you know, facing. And then I will chip away at his left wing and damage the engine. And then like a shark, you know, that's injured a turtle, I will lurk around in the waters above it, waiting for it as I see its engine slowly sputter out and fail. I will then swoop in for the kill. And I kind of like that with the heavy tank duels. I saw a really cool meme about this where it was like, you know, the BR 9.0 tank and like, wee! Your chemical armor should have, your chemical shell shouldn't have penetrated my 15 layers of semantic plates or whatever they're called. Well, wee! Your armor pin fin stabilizing discarding uranium depleted round shouldn't have penetrated my 600 millimeters of plates. And then I'm just like, haha, Yak Tiger go plunk. Oh, it didn't penetrate the T95. And then T95 go, yay, my round go plunk, and then it hits my arm. I'm like, well, you broke my track, but whatever. I'm still facing towards you. As soon as I finish reloading, I'm gonna fire again. And then you hit them again, and you do nothing. And they hit you again, and they do nothing. I like those top tier, super heavy tank duels like T95, Jag Tiger, Tortoise. But those are like the three that come to mind. The American T95 with its quad tracks. You've got the British Tortoise. You got the German oversized Jag Tiger. I was considering putting the Jag Tiger on this list. At the end of the day, that cannon isn't really that good. I love the idea of a 128mm naval gun on a tank. It's not a naval gun, but it's naval gun size. It is so overkill for what it's intended for. An 88mm would have been more than fine. But no, they needed a 128mm gun. But when it comes down to War Thunder, it's not really good for sniping beyond around a kilometer. Whereas, let me explain, the 128 has a lot of drop. It is not accurate for sniping at long range. Plus the reload's pretty long as well. The Tortoise has a long reload, but it doesn't feel as long as the Jag Tiger. Yeah, I'm just thinking, I used the banana for scale in my top 5 tank museum when I did my top 5 tanks at the Tank Museum. I really don't like that name, Tank Museum. I watched a Lindy Beige video recently, which is probably why I've developed my random style of speaking now, where Lindy Beige also brought up, I was like, I don't really like that the Tank Museum used to go from Borrington Tank Museum is now called The Tank Museum. I don't like that generic name, The Tank Museum. But yes, I put the Tortoise on my top 5 tanks at the Tank Museum. And I had my banana for scale so you can see how absolutely chongus it is. Basically, I bought a bunch of bananas for breakfast. And I bought like the smallest bunch I could, which is only 5. And I had my friend with me. And I knew I was going to go back home at the end of the day anyway. So the bananas are going to go to my kitchen. But I didn't want to just buy 2 bananas. I just bought a bunch of 5 bananas. And I was like, wait a minute, I've got a banana with me in my bag. And, you know, people like that XD meme of banana for scale. And the Tortoise was like the biggest tank I reviewed on that day. So yeah, banana for scale. I didn't really discuss this tank in that much depth, but I just like the super heavy tonk. There is that turret that the commander gets. It's got like 2 little light machine guns in there. You're not going to shoot down a plane with it. I did once, and only once, I did manage to kill like a little AA vehicle that was trying to flank me. I don't remember what vehicle it was, but it had exposed crew. It may have been that Russian twin 23mm, like, it's essentially like the milk tractor sort of thing. Not milk tractor, the milk truck. It flanked me, and it was like, ha, I'm going to start pumping 23mm armor piercing rounds to your rear engine deck. And I'm like, not Sonny Jim. So I used the key binding to switch to the commander, and then I just turned the little turret around, and I just zapped him with twin Vickers guns. But yeah, that was the only time I've ever got a kill with that, and don't count on it being that useful. When it comes to being bombed, you don't really need to fear anything, unless it's a direct hit from a 500 kilogram and up. It ain't doing anything to you. Worst case scenario, it blows off your tracks, just hope you're facing towards the enemy, and they won't do anything to you as you start repairing. You aren't invulnerable though to like the fancy heat rounds which you start seeing at the BR that this tank is in. You start seeing post-war tanks This is where it gets a bit awkward when they start flinging these chemical rounds at you, which basically say "lol steel," and they will just pen you easy peasy. If you go up against World War II vehicles, you will be more than fine. Now, if you have an issue with CAS, have no fear, because it's time for some AA. Now, this was a tough choice between the M16, aka the Kraut Mower, also known as the Meat Chopper. You know, the M16 didn't earn this nickname for no reason. Kraut Mower and Meat Chopper, they were used in mostly ground combat anyway, because the German army Germany didn't have many planes left. The skies were essentially secured, so you didn't really need an SBAA to shoot down planes. So when it was needed, it was used against infantry, and I do not want to be on the receiving end of 150 cal, let alone 4 of them strapped together. Anyway, it was a choice between the M16 or the Whirlwind. Now, barely any Whirlwinds were built. I think it was something like just over 100 were built, compared to 3,000 M16s. Both have 4 barrels of fun, 4 50 cals and 4 20 mils. But in the end, I chose the Whirlwind. Now, I could list you the pros and cons of both vehicles, but I don't think that's really necessary. So, the Whirlwind has quad 20 mils on a Panzer IV hull. The Panzer IV hull's a pretty good medium tank. It's fairly mobile. Not the nippiest thing, but not the slowest thing either. It kind of gets a bit bogged down if you're going up a small gradient and then try to change directions, but no biggie. Crew are sort of protected. Not fully protected, but the driver and radio gunner are really well protected in the Panzer IV hull. They are very well protected in their positions. They're just straight up within the Panzer IV bit. The gunner, commander, loader, they're kind of a little bit vulnerable in that little turret on top thing. The armor's angled pretty well for that, but at the end of the day, light machine gun or heavy machine gun fire will just about go through it. You've got more heavily armored SPAAs, such as the British Crusader AA, where it's a fully enclosed turret, but those cannons aren't really the best. Whereas I like the burst fire of the Whirlwind. 4 20mm cannons open up, bam, 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 and then you got to reload for a bit, then you're good to fire again. And it's got armor-piercing rounds, which can penetrate most medium tanks at the current BR it goes up against stuff. So you are not a defenseless SPA like, oh no, they've flanked my entire team and now I'm vulnerable. No, you activate the doom music, call an ambulance, but not for me, as you load in the Panzergranate, whatever thingy armor-piercing rounds, which can pen around 60mm if they haven't changed it. And 60mm is not a joke. That would just flat easily go for the side of a Sherman. It will go for the side of a Cromwell. Whirlwind is fairly vulnerable. People will be able to strafe it fairly easily, but it could be worse. You could be like the M16, where definitely light machine gun fire from anything would take you out, and the M16 only has 3 crew members versus the Whirlwind, which has 5. And like I said, imagine if you get strafed by an enemy fighter. They will kill all 3 men in the turret pretty easily. But there's that sneaky radio gunner hiding downstairs inside the tank. Once he moves out all the dead bodies of his crewmates and moves upstairs, your Whirlwind is basically good to operate again. Whereas the M16, if you get strafed, if you only got driver assistant, gunner, they'll probably all die in the first strafing run. I don't really have a particular reason to choose the Whirlwind versus the M16. I just like that heavy DACA versus the sustained DACA of the M16. I could have put the Crusader AA on this list, as it is a very competitive AA, but its guns aren't that good. But anyway, those are my top 5 favorite tanks in War Thunder. They aren't the best tanks in War Thunder, but I find normally if I want to like relax and just play chill Thunder, these are the vehicles that I kind of gravitate towards. They just work. They're relatively simple. I don't need much brain power to play them. I just find them fun. Anyway, thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video.